In the future, human life has become a commodity. Poor people can donate several years or even decades of their lives in exchange for high returns. Rich individuals, as recipients, gain longer lifespans and create more wealth. The company that developed this technology is based on this concept and persuades more people to donate their time because there are countless rich people waiting in line for matching donors. There are immense profits involved, and children from impoverished areas naturally become their first choice as no one needs money more than them.
700 тысяч евро. С рождения Денниса?
However, the 15-year commitment raises some concerns for the young boy who has just come of age. This minor issue is no problem for the experienced broker, Hale. He immediately begins persuading the boy's parents. This family has been waiting for legal status for over a decade, and with the $700,000, they can fulfill their dreams and live a dignified life. That no one can resist such tremendous temptation, the boy promptly signs the agreement. After completing this transaction, Hale achieves his highest performance for the quarter, securing his position as the best manager of the year. Boss even approves a large batch of loan applications, allowing Hale to purchase a luxury apartment with his wife. However, not long after, an accident occurs. That night, when Hale and his wife Maddie returned home, they discovered their apartment engulfed in a massive fire, consuming almost all of their assets. Fortunately, Hale had insured the house, but what followed was devastating news. The investigation revealed that the fire was caused by an unextinguished candle in the room, leading the insurance company to deny their claim. To make matters worse, the bank demanded immediate repayment of the remaining $2.5 million loan in full. Otherwise, they would enforce the only collateral they had. Upon hearing this, Maddie froze on the spot. The sole collateral for the house happened to be her 40-year lifespan, as her DNA matched that of a wealthy individual. However, the bank advisor at the time assured her that there was no risk, and the worst-case scenario would be selling the house. They wouldn't typically resort to using collateral. Hale panicked upon hearing this. He quickly proposed donating a few years of his life, but the response he received shattered his hope. The wealthy individual who matched his DNA has already passed away, and currently, there are no suitable recipients for him. For Maddie, this outcome was equivalent to a death sentence.
Боюсь, ситуация безнадежная.
Должен же быть какой-то выход.
Just as she stepped out of the door, Maddie was forcibly taken away by the police. In despair, Hale could only place his last hope in his boss. He laid out all the circumstances, hoping that his boss would approve a loan to save his wife's life. The boss seemed somewhat sympathetic and asked him to send over the documents, promising to think of a solution. However, until half an hour before his wife's surgery, Hale received no message from his boss. Unable to sit still any longer, Hale stormed into the hospital, intending to save his wife, but before he could take action, he was subdued. He could only listen to his wife's screams from the hallway as Maddie gradually lost consciousness under the effects of anesthesia. After it was all over, Hale took his wife to a cheap hotel. Throughout the night, Maddie couldn't fall asleep. She couldn't help but observe herself in the mirror, witnessing her skin sagging and wrinkles deepening. By the time the night was over, she had transformed into a frail old woman. Hale arrived at the company early in the morning, refusing to give up hope. If his boss approved his loan application, he could use the money to buy back those 40 years for his wife. But all he received was a promotion notice. Hale, unwilling to accept this, sought out his boss, but the boss didn't even spare him a glance.
Эй, вы обещали мне помочь!
Если вам дорого ваше будущее...
It was only at this moment that Hale realized how a capitalist could never truly empathize with him. It was merely a perfunctory gesture. Luckily, his wife hadn't been completely crushed. She started drawing decorative patterns to make herself look younger, but the mirror reminded her that it was all in vain. In Maddie's eyes, her husband's attempts to comfort her seemed like pity, and they soon erupted into an argument. Shortly after, she experienced sharp pain in her abdomen. After a medical examination, Hale learned the devastating truth. His wife had been pregnant, and the life-saving surgery had resulted in a miscarriage. Hale completely broke down. Both he and his wife had longed for a child. This shattered Maddie's spirit, and she didn't want her aged body to hold her husband back. She decided to separate from him. When Hale dropped his wife off at his parents' house, his mother couldn't help but burst into tears as she held her daughter, who looked even older than herself. Hale never dreamed that his once proud career would completely ruin his life. As he sat lost and broken in the park, he suddenly noticed a middle-aged person of 40 years old calling a little girl mom. Hale immediately realized that the little girl was the elderly woman who had bought someone else's time. He quickly followed them and asked where she had undergone the surgery because he could tell at a glance that she wasn't a client of their company. After the emergence of this technology, many people who desired rejuvenation were discouraged by the exorbitant costs, giving rise to an underground industry. The girl provided him with a contact information, and Hale immediately devised a plan. He got in touch with an underground doctor in a neighboring country, prepared a fake passport, and armed himself for self-defense. Once everything was in place, he spent an entire night outside his boss's house. As soon as his boss's car emerged in the early morning, Hale followed closely behind. The car drove into a cemetery, and a young woman stepped out of the vehicle. Hale knew she was his boss because he had discovered through his investigation that Albright, the one who had taken away 40 years of his wife Maddie's life in exchange for her youth, was his boss. Albright lingered in front of a tombstone for a while. Hale discreetly approached her after a slight disguise, but he was discovered before he could take action. After a struggle, Hale finally managed to subdue Albright and stun her. He then sprayed a red symbol on the tombstone, a symbol belonging to an organization called Phoenix. They opposed this life exchange technology, believing it to be the exploitation of the poor by the wealthy. Not long ago, they had stormed Phoenix Corporation's hospital and killed several wealthy individuals who had just undergone the procedure. Hale wanted to frame the incident on the Phoenix organization and immediately found his wife, who was at work. He claimed to have found a solution and had hidden Albright in a car recycling yard. He then revealed the truth to his wife, but Maddie believed he had gone mad. If they were caught, Hale's life would be ruined as well. Hale remained silent and ran straight to Albright, making her see how her own face had aged. He then turned to his wife and told her that there was no turning back now. However, suspicions arose among Albright's henchmen when they noticed the symbol left by Hale. Phoenix organization was known for direct killings, never involving kidnappings. They quickly identified Hale through surveillance footage and traced his current location based on his face. Albright's private security team immediately arrived at the recycling yard, but Hale had already left. By daybreak, he and his wife had boarded a ferry bound for the neighboring country. Albright was confined inside a large cardboard box in the cargo hold. However, as the ferry approached its destination and was about to dock, Maddie noticed police officers everywhere outside the window.
Это за нами?
Черт не знаю. Кем еще?
In a state of panic, Hale looked at a family of 4 sitting behind them and came up with a plan. He took the family's child hostage and hid in the man's car, threatening him to drive his truck and face the inspection. Meanwhile, Maddie hid with Albright inside the truck's cargo box to avoid being discovered. However, the man became nervous and stumbled while being questioned by the police. The officers asked him why he was so tense, but after some hesitation, he decided to seek help.
Я просто не привык, когда в меня целятся.
К чему?
Unfortunately, the police misunderstood his intentions, thinking he was afraid of his subordinate's gun. They immediately ended the interrogation and let them go. Hale finally breathed a sigh of relief. He released the family of 4 and quickly resumed their journey in the truck. However, during a rest stop along the way, Albright revealed a shocking truth. She claimed that Hale had kidnapped the wrong person and that she was actually Albright's daughter, Anna. She explained that she simply resembled her mother. Hale immediately checked his phone and discovered that Albright's only daughter had died from a premature aging illness over a decade ago. The girl quickly clarified that she was Anna's younger sister, and her mother had kept her identity hidden to protect her from any harm. Upon hearing this, Hale and his wife were stunned. Had all their efforts been in vain? But Hale quickly realized that Albright was lying to buy time. He promptly tied her up. By evening, they found an abandoned hotel to seek refuge. However, the girl insisted that she was Albright's daughter and revealed that she had always opposed her mother's actions. For years, she had been trying to convince her mother to stop engaging in such life-threatening business. Hale, unwilling to listen to the woman's cunning arguments, reached for the duct tape to silence her, but Maddie intervened and stopped him, seemingly convinced by the girl's words. She was no longer certain if they had kidnapped the right person, but Hale had his own plans.
Ближайшие родственники обычно подходят, даже если это ее дочь. У вас с ней может быть совместимость.
However, Maddie suddenly grew angry, clearly seeing the girl as an object in her husband's eyes. After a heated argument, the couple parted ways. Taking advantage of the situation, the girl requested to take a bath. With no mood left, Hale untied her, and as he turned away, the girl grabbed a loose handle and struck him with it before making her escape. Hale quickly chased after her, but outside the door was a vast forest, and he couldn't see where the girl had run off to. Desperately running through the woods, the girl accidentally fell into a swamp, sinking deeper and deeper. She was on the verge of being engulfed entirely. Frantically, she reached for a dead tree above her head and shouted for help. Maddie, who had heard the cry, extended a stick for her to grab onto, saving her life. Maddie turned on the hot water for her to warm up, but as she undressed, Maddie noticed that she didn't have the 3 surgical scars that should have been present after the operation. This meant that she truly wasn't Albright, and she revealed the truth to her husband. Hale suggested that the wounds might have disappeared during the process of skin regeneration. At that moment, Maddie also realized that her own mindset had changed. While the girl had fallen into the swamp, she had feared that she would drown and lose her chance to revert to her youth. As they discussed this, Albright's henchmen had once again tracked their location. Armed and ready, they advanced towards their position. In the dead of night, the sleeping couple was suddenly awakened by a slight noise. Opening their eyes, they found several armed individuals standing before them. However, these people were not Albright's henchmen but members of the opposition organization called Phoenix. They were forcibly taken to a massive warehouse. Shortly after, Hale learned the entire truth from them. It turned out that the girl was truly Albright's daughter. All the misfortunes that Hale had faced were part of Albright's scheme. She had accidentally discovered that Maddie's DNA matched hers and intentionally approved Hale's home loan as part of her plan. The couple was tricked into buying the apartment and then manipulated by the bank employees into mortgaging Maddie's 40 years of life. Later, Albright found an opportunity to set fire to their apartment and colluded with the insurance company to deny their claim, attributing the responsibility to them. Soon after, Albright applied for forced execution and took away Maddie's 40 years of life. It was only then that Hale discovered the whole truth. From the beginning, they had been lured into a trap. At that moment, Hale received a message from an underground doctor who provided him with the address of his clinic.
Боюсь, на прием вы не попадете. Действительно 6 часов.
They had learned through their informant that Albright's people were tracking them, and Albright herself was among them. They hoped Hale could trick Albright into coming alone. As the people approached the door, Hale was pushed outside to negotiate. He then proposed to talk to Albright. A young woman stepped out of the car. It was Albright, who had become young again after taking away Maddie's 40 years. She offered $1 million to exchange for her daughter, while Hale could use the money to find a new donor for his wife. However, Hale saw through her words and only wanted Albright to personally return the 40 years. Albright insisted on ensuring her daughter's safety first. Hale took advantage of this and proposed that only Albright could enter to confirm her daughter's well-being. If anyone else tried to enter, his wife would immediately pull the trigger on her daughter. But just as Albright decided to enter, one of her subordinates suddenly sensed something was amiss. This problem caught Hale off guard, leaving him momentarily speechless, unsure of how to respond. As the situation was about to be exposed, the female leader hidden in the warehouse immediately ordered an attack. One of Albright's subordinates pointed a gun at her, revealing himself as an infiltrator among Albright's ranks. A fierce gunfight broke out between the two sides. Hale quickly escaped into the warehouse, finding his wife, who was being held captive upstairs. He overpowered the guard and fled with his wife and Anna. However, as he prepared to start the car, Anna suddenly pulled out a gun and aimed it at Maddie. It was a weapon she had obtained earlier, but as she pulled the trigger, she discovered that there were no bullets inside. Maddie finally realized the situation and understood that it was a life-or-death situation. She fiercely punched Anna and continued to strike her until she was unconscious. They hastily placed her in the car and made their escape. Hale looked at Anna, still shaken by the experience, and at that moment, he also realized something. If they were to kill Anna, they would be no different from those who casually took away others' lives.
Расскажем прессе.
Это вернет мои годы.
Отвезем ее в больницу.
At this point, Maddie had completely succumbed to darkness, driven solely by the desire to reclaim her original lifespan. Since her husband had changed his mind, Maddie directly threatened him with her own life. She forced Hale out of the car and then drove to the clinic herself. It was an empty factory building, and before long, a bus arrived slowly. Many impoverished children from the slums and the people who were to exchange their lives got off the bus. Anna was taken into the operating room, and Maddie followed suit. Soon, the surgery was completed, and Maddie drove away from there alone. Anna was also released, and when she returned home, she discovered that her mother was not dead. The bulletproof vest had saved her life. By the next morning, Anna had aged significantly. She cried, hoping that her mother would match her in age, but Albright merely stated that she would find a new donor as soon as possible. A year later, A rejuvenated Maddie had a prominent baby bump, and she had a new boyfriend. Hale watched from a distance. Finding solace in the situation, he turned and walked away, joining his comrades to regroup. It turned out that after that fateful night, he had joined the opposition organization, Phoenix, and launched a rebellion against the very career he had once been proud of. It was not only for their sake but for all the children as well.